I'm the Exhibitions and Engagement Director here at Mark Arts. And I'm joined by Rachel McDaniel, our outreach coordinator here at Mark Arts as well. And we're thrilled to have you all tonight. I would like to remind you that during the presentation, to go ahead and mute your microphone, just in case the dog barks.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
I'm like, of course, right when you start recording, someone comes to my door.
I feel like your dog was like perfectly on cue for that.
I have my headphones in for a reason.
Yes.
Dogs.
Yeah.
Sorry. They were welcoming you guys as well.
Yes. Yes. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that up at the top bar, the very first thing is the chat, and you're welcome to leave questions there. When Shana is finished speaking, we'll open it up for questions, and you could just unmute and ask questions, or you could put them in the chat if you're shy and you just want to type them up. That's fine too. So we are thrilled to have Shana Levenson give this virtual talk tonight. A little bit of background, Shana has her bachelor's degree in fashion design. And then after her kids were born, she went back to school for a master's in fine art painting, and produces just the loveliest photorealistic feminine paintings. And she turned out to be the perfect exhibition juror for the show that we are hosting right now, which is A la Mode, the Language of Fashion and Art. And here's the catalog. This will be on view at Mark Arts until March 15th. And for this exhibition, instead of showing fashion as art, we wanted to look at how artists use fashion in their art practice, how they are using it to communicate the status of the sitter, the emotions, the lifestyle that they have. And so it wasn't an easy task, and Shana really did an amazing job of pulling it together. And I was telling her earlier, when we hung the show, we could have hung it 3 or 4 different ways because everything went together so well. So thank you so much, Shana, for selecting such lovely works of art for us to enjoy.
It was an honor.
And I'm not going to talk very much here. I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you get started.
Yeah. First of all, I'm Shana Levenson. Thank you guys so much for being here. It was an honor to jury this exhibition. It was so hard to choose the top pieces. There was so much to choose from, so much great work. And it was humbling to be a part of, so I appreciate that. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm originally from Austin, Texas, and I have a little PowerPoint presentation that I have set up. I'm going to go in and out of it to go along with my write-up that I prepared. So I, as most artists have, I've been drawing my entire life. I have an older brother who is an artist, and so I wanted to be just like him. I was always carrying around a sketchbook. I was always drawing. And so I didn't really think of it as a career. It was just something that I did. I remember designing my prom dress, knowing that I was going to go to school for fashion design my senior year. One of my mom's friends helped sew it. I went to the store with her, picked out all the fabric. My design was way too intricate, so she had to, tone it down a little bit, but it was a lot of fun to do, and I felt it was really unique to have that experience to be able to design my prom dress. So as I said, I went to the University of, as she said, I went to the University of Texas for fashion, and I loved discussing the importance of fashion and how it described people. I remember being in a class, and there was a debate that we had on having high schools be uniformed, or if kids should wear their own clothing and come to school with how they want to dress. And I was such an advocate for kids being able to dress how they want to and be able to express themselves how they want to with clothing, because clothing can say so much about who you are. And so in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and start my slideshow. Share screen. We practiced this earlier, so hopefully this works. Okay. Play from the start. So the language of fashion and art. So when I went to school, I was obsessed with Donna Karan of the 90s and 2000s. I loved the simplicity of her designs. I actually wanted to, at some point, go and work with her just because I loved, this is runway stuff, but a lot of her clothing was designed for all women in all different body types. And I really appreciated her simplicity in design. So she was a big part of what I loved within fashion, as well as on the opposite end, Alexander McQueen. His work is just so intricate and uses so many different types of fabrics, lace and satins, and just out of the box kind of designs, which really inspires a lot of the things that I started painting later on. But I loved his work when I was in school. I also loved studying the history of fashion. The Baroque and Rococo period specifically were some of my favorite styles. I really was impressed with how everything was handmade and the beads were sewn on individually and the lace was made and just how delicate everything was. I'm gonna go ahead and go back to the screen here. I wanted to study at Oxford when I was in school, but things took a turn and I ended up having to take some time off from school. And in the meantime, I became a makeup artist with MAC Makeup. So before I finished school, I ended up taking a little bit of a pause, became a makeup artist, which I think is a big part of me loving painting portraits because I love the face and I love to, I understand the sculpture of the face. So I went to school as a makeup artist before I finished my degree. After I finished school, my then husband, my ex-husband, got accepted into the Air National Guard, and we had to move 2 weeks after I graduated. So the first place we moved was Enid, Oklahoma, very small town in Oklahoma. It was a huge shift for me. And so I started teaching myself how to paint. I bought all sorts of materials. I was using watercolor, acrylic, oil, everything that I could. And I was painting magazine covers. I mean, there was no rhyme or reason. I was just kind of teaching myself how to paint because it was something that I knew that I loved to do. We also moved to different towns. So in each town, we eventually moved to Glendale, Arizona. And in Glendale, I started going to classes. Sorry, guys. I started taking classes at Zelda. Let mom finish her lecture. I started taking classes at the community college. And I remembered in the class, we were drawing all the students. Each student had to pose for the class at a time. And the teacher said to me, I can't wait to see you in galleries someday. And it was very impactful for me because I was in my mid-20s. I was the oldest student, which doesn't sound that old, but at the time they were mostly young kids who had just finished high school at the community college. And I felt like I was starting so late. And so that really pushed me to keep learning. And so I started taking classes at the Scottsdale Artist School. I took a watercolor class. I took a nude drawing class. And then when we eventually made our way to Albuquerque, New Mexico, I started studying at the University of New Mexico in anticipation of applying for my master's at some point. So I loved drawing those classes. The University of New Mexico is mostly known for printmaking. So they weren't necessarily as focused on realism. But I did learn quite a bit from that program and knew that I did want to get my master's. In the meantime, I got pregnant with my children. And when my son turned 1 year old, I knew that I had to finish my, this passion of getting my master's. So I applied to an online program, which I had no idea they existed. I'd been doing all this research and found the Academy of Art in San Francisco. And originally, when I applied at the Academy of Art, I applied for illustration. I thought that I wanted to illustrate and write children's books because at the time when my kids were so young, children's books are unbelievable. The illustrations, the stories, I was very inspired by the books that I was reading to my children and thought that was something that I wanted to do. So I originally started off in illustration and took my very first course there, which was chiaroscuro. And if you don't know what that is, it's studying in charcoal with black and white, and fell in love with the portraiture and immediately switched over to doing my master's in fine arts instead of illustration. So I'm gonna get a sip of water, guys, it's dry. So in the meantime, while I was getting my master's, I got divorced, which shifted my artwork greatly. My stuff was a little bit lighter, and then during my divorce, I started focusing on some more kind of self-portraits through my children, a little bit more serious work. After I graduated, I was living in a condo at the time, and right down the street, I met a woman. Well, funny story, I was walking by and I see all these lace dresses hanging from the window. And the condo that I lived was like a live workspace or just, a live space. And so it was her live workspace and it was her studio space, and she designed lace dresses. And so we ended up somehow getting connected on social media. And immediately I messaged her and I said, hey, I would love to collaborate with you. Do you think I could use your dresses in my paintings? And therefore, the blossoming of my lace pieces. I loved painting lace. I just loved like how delicate lace is. Also, really looking at like old masters paintings and how they painted lace really inspired me wanting to paint lace in a more contemporary way. So I'm gonna start the slideshow again and start sharing the very first lace piece I did. So the piece on the far left is the very first lace piece I did. And when I tell you, I thought I was crazy, I absolutely thought I was crazy. This piece is just unbelievably delicate. And I wanted to not only, showcase the delicacy of it, but I wanted to do justice for Teresa's designs. And so I dove into this piece and just absolutely fell in love with lace and with fabric. And so these are the first 3 pieces I painted, just diving into it. The piece on the left, I don't know if you can tell, but in the background, I did this really detailed kind of texture with a stencil, and the stencil in the background kind of emulates the design of the dress, which I purposefully did. So I used a lot of just different types of lace pieces that inspired storytelling within the work, with like the circle in the background within the one on the left, and then the more whimsical painting on the right. A few more lace pieces here. So it's just started kind of getting a more storytelling within the lace, using the lace to, I wanted the idea of lace, people think lace is delicate, but I wanted to capture the strength of the women within the lace, whether it's me and I'm storytelling my story or just the generalization of a story of a woman in general. I wanted the women to appear strong, even though lace can be delicate. When the threads are woven together, it's actually quite a strong fabric. Here are some close-up details. So when I'm painting the lace, and I've taught a couple of lace painting classes, which I'm going to do a little plug. I'm actually teaching a lace painting workshop in Mexico City in September. But I do a lot of texture in the portions of lace that are coming towards the viewer. So I love adding in thick texture within the lace that I'm painting. I also like to glaze. If you guys don't know what glazing is when you mix a medium and make with the oil paint, make it a thinner and just kind of are able to tone things back. So I'll do a lot of glazing. Here's a close-up of this piece with the sheer fabric. In the meantime, I started noticing, like, I like to post just little sections of my paintings at a time, which inspired this new series of just cropped lace pieces, almost little vignettes of a little story of the woman's life, just a moment that you're capturing. And I went on a year-long, maybe a year and a half to 2 years of doing 11 by 14, small 8 by 10, just small little cropped lace pieces, playing with different compositions, using hands to describe emotion or the way the body is folded, or moving within the painting, within the panel. And I had such a fun time just kind of exploring these different compositions. My very favorite one is on the right. I just love how the hands are even but not, and just holding on to the little bit of sheer fabric. And here's a great example of glazing. You can see that on the sheer portions of the fabric, you can see a little bit of the skin coming through. What I would actually do is paint some of the skin, and then I would take, there's a pearl white paint that I have, and I would thin it out, and I would just glaze over that sheer fabric to create that sheerness. I also started playing around with the scale. These are quite large. I think they were 40 by 40. And the idea actually came to me from a commission that this woman asked for a large lace piece. And so I thought, well, this is kind of really crazy to do and a lot of fun. A different way of approaching it for sure, because it was a lot more textured, felt more abstract than the smaller pieces. But I had a blast doing these. I started playing with compositions in different ways on tondos. Tondos are circles. And so I was using these circle paintings to kind of almost like, it sounds so creepy, but like a little peephole into their lives, and playing around with composition that way. I found this designer, Costarelos, online during COVID, and decided to splurge and buy one of their dresses, the one in the middle. And I used it in these two paintings to try out a different version of fabric and lace and textures and applique. This dress has beautiful thick applique on it, just sewn onto the sheer fabric. And I had such a fun time playing around with that. So here moves on to the designer that really like inspired my very first solo show that I had at my gallery in Santa Fe. These are just a few of the many, many favorite paintings of mine of Soroya's. And of course, online does not do them justice. My husband, David Casson, and I were lucky enough to teach a workshop in Spain a few years ago, and we went to the Sorolla house. And in the Sorolla house, I saw that painting on the right. I saw the painting on the right, the Prado. The other paintings were the Sorolla house. And I decided I wanted to do a similar composition as this piece, because I stood in front of this painting and thought, wow, this woman is unbelievable. And obviously the fabric and just the delicacy of it. So I wanted to do something similar in a more contemporary way. So I painted myself with the lace, and then behind me are all of my children's artwork on the wall. And I titled it Art Collector, because it was like all my cherished things around me. And I felt like she was just sitting there stoic, holding on to this piece of jewelry. And it just such a beautiful piece. And so at the Sorolla show and at Sorolla's house, they have all of the dresses next to the paintings that inspired the paintings. So at my very first solo show, I thought it would be really beautiful to have the pieces that inspired my paintings next to the paintings. Here are a few of those. As I started progressing and exploring different textures and materials, I met this woman named Vanica. This is Vanica. She reached out to me on social media, and she asked me if I would paint her and her family's heirlooms. And I was absolutely honored. And so within this painting is the rug that her mother made, her grandmother's velvet dress, and all of the jewelry is family heirlooms or jewelry that her family has made. The feather is her father's feather from his cowboy hat. She also, in her own style, loves pinup. And so her hair is very different from her culture. And I love being able to do that juxtaposition of styles of a pinup hair with all of her family's culture around her. This painting was purchased by Las Cruces, the city of Las Cruces, and is hanging now in their building. Here's another piece. I did a Vonica, excuse me, with the rug, and again, more jewelry. And hence, this begins kind of my love of painting jewelry. And so I collected this piece. I taught a workshop in South Africa and collected a couple of necklaces to paint on my friend Vanessa. And so here are a few of the paintings I did of Vanessa with some of the jewelry. The interesting thing, and I'll show you in the next slide, these are beads. This is another necklace I bought there. And this obviously is not the cultural piece, but this goes into diving into my love of painting jewelry. The thing that when I painted this necklace, and I think this is the piece that's actually in the show in with you guys at Mark Arts. I actually paint the darkest value of the strand first as a string, and then I go in and I individually paint the beads and then come back in and just vary them. And as I see that the beads are kind of going within her chest, I know that they will darken and overlap. And so it is just kind of going through and individually dabbing into each bead. During COVID, a company reached out to me, Armenta Jewelry, and they asked if they could send me pieces to paint within my paintings, which I obviously did not turn down. So I had to give them back, unfortunately. But I used these pieces and taught some workshops online, jewelry painting workshops online during COVID, and was able to get a couple of really beautiful paintings out of the jewelry that Armenta sent me. Armenta is based in Houston. They're a female-owned company, which really kind of inspired me as well. And they go to other countries and teach women how to make jewelry so they can start their own businesses. It's a hand painting workshop I taught online with jewelry as well, focusing on hands and jewelry. I, again, had the idea to splurge on a beautiful necklace from Chanel, used that in a couple of paintings, which in turn had me fall in love with painting pearls. And so this is where my pearl obsession came into fruition. I actually bought this piece on Etsy. If you guys ever have ideas of jewelry or items or anything that you want to buy, Etsy is such a great place to go to find artisans or people who are making unique pieces. You're supporting the arts or somebody who's created something, and you're able to use it in your work. And so I just fell in love with painting pearls and did a couple of pieces, which I have to say that every time I start painting the pearls, I regret it immediately until the end, and then I love it. But as you can see on the details on the right, there's so many different colors that go into pearls. I surprisingly never use white when I'm painting pearls, ever. And honestly, there's no white painted in my lace either, which no one ever believes, but I use a very light, it's called King's Blue Extra Pale from Vasari, but I never use white. Anybody that studied with me before knows that I always take white off of my palette. And this is the latest piece I did for a show that I was invited to be in with this pearl painting. So now we're moving on to where the direction of my work is kind of heading at the moment. I'm starting to do larger figurative pieces using, like what I talked about earlier within my lecture about how clothing describes who people are. My new work is more personal and how to describing what this person is. This is my daughter, and she loves Studio Ghibli. And so this is one of her favorite sweaters. I don't even know if it fits her anymore. She's growing so quickly. So I love that she chose to wear this in this piece because it represents who she is. And so in the next works that I'm going to be creating, this is the latest piece I did. I am exploring painting people in the clothing that describes who they are. And so, you know, this is one of my daughter's friends, and they came in wearing this t-shirt and the jewelry, and you just can tell that they have, you know, their personality just kind of comes out within the clothing. And so my hopes is to create this new series of work just exploring who people are and how they like to identify and with their clothing. Um, Mind you, this t-shirt again has no white in it whatsoever. And I had no idea how difficult graphic t-shirts were until I decided to paint this Fleetwood Mac t-shirt, which I was very nervous to do because Fleetwood Mac is one of my favorite bands. And I wanted to make sure I, you know, did a good job giving homage to the t-shirt. So um, anyway, if that is the end of my PowerPoint presentation.
All right. Hopefully you can hear me again. Thank you so much, Shana.
Yeah.
I love hearing all of your journey, but also just the details of your technique and how you go about it. I want to go ahead and open it up for questions. If anyone has any questions, and again, you can put it in the chat, or you can just unmute and ask directly. Go ahead, Autumn.
Okay, I have like a million questions, so I'll try not to do them all at once. But
Yeah, no, ask away.
I definitely have to ask two before I let someone else have a turn. So whenever you did your first solo show, the dresses with the pieces, I love that. And I was just wondering, did you have to buy all those dresses, or were they like shared with you since you used them? Or
Yeah, I actually should have shared the pictures of Teresa putting them up. No, Teresa let me borrow them. She had the model forms. I bought a few model forms, which I ended up giving to my neighbor because she uses them now. But no, she brought them out, let me have them there for the evening. So
that's
yeah, it was pure collaboration with her, and I would love to work with her again once I'm done with this new series of work because I love exploring. She's always coming up with new stuff. I'm like, oh my God, I gotta paint that. So
that's awesome. And my other question is about the technique you were talking about, the sheer how you would water down or thin out the
yeah.
version of white, but I know you said you don't use white. So was that the pearl blue that you're thinning out?
No, so I either with the if I'm gonna do if you're doing like like a sheer fabric, I'll try to get like the value of it as close as possible with the skin tone, but then I'll use either I'll oil I use walnut alkyd and sand oil mixed together evenly or liquid original, and then I'll add more medium than paint, but I'll either use a pearl white, which is a really translucent pearl white by Rembrandt. You have to be really careful with that. If you use too much, you can get too shiny. It's not my favorite. You have to very delicately use it. Or I'll use King's Blue Extra Pale by Vasari, and you want to make it so thin so it just kind of creates this sheerness, and you still see the skin through it.
Okay, got it. Okay, yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting. And
Do you glaze at all? Or do you ever glaze?
oh, this is funny. So I'm the one who made the shoe and the mask in the show
Oh
that
yeah,
so I actually do more like
beautiful.
sculpture stuff and
Oh
less.
yeah.
And I have just recently bought oil paints to take one of your classes, but I actually haven't. I've only oil painted once, and it was back in college. So most of what you're saying is foreign. So I'm glad it's being recorded.
Yeah, no, oil paint for me, in my opinion, is a lot more forgiving than other mediums because acrylic dries so quickly. The beauty and romance of oil paint is that it never dries. I mean, it does dry, but if you think of the romance of oil paint, it's constantly moving. And so there's something really beautiful about being able to consistently be able to manipulate the paint. It's very forgiving. And so people always are fearful that oil paint is going to be so hard to work with, but it's actually much easier because you can go back to an area and adjust it.
Huh. Uh, and then you said you work on the pearls, and do you do that from the dark and then work lighter as well?
Yeah, so I like to find that kind of like the core shadow of the dark. And then there's like the reflected light underneath of whatever that reflection is. Either it's another pearl or the skin or whatever it is. And then find the lights above it. Yeah, but I work on one pearl at a time because I want to soften it out. So like if I left the dark to dry, then I wouldn't be able to soften it to give that
Round.
three-dimensional quality. So edges are actually really important. That's a great question because like with the beads, I want the beads to dry. I want to do a dot, let that dry, and then like come in with another highlight and that let that one highlight kind of pop through. But with a pearl, because I want that pearl to kind of have that roundness, each pearl has to be worked on individually.
So how long does one, like the bigger one that was zoomed in of the lace, about how long would something like that take you?
Which one? The lace
It
one
was
or
the
the
commissioned, you did a commissioned lace, but
oh, the large lace one, like the
the
more
pearls too.
abstractish one?
Yeah, yes, that
The
one.
large abstract one probably took me a couple of months just because, you know, it was a little outside. Well, I'd never painted anything over life sized. And so I was approaching it differently, you know, and so there was going to be a lot more paint in areas. And then, of course, like the areas that I wanted to go back, I wanted to be thinner in paint. So that way it wasn't super flat. So I wanted to look like it was still on a body when you stepped back. And then when you come forward, the parts that are forward, you know, like the arm or the chest area, you want those parts to have like a lot more texture to it, a lot more meat to it.
And then, and I'll stop after this one. And then the
You can ask
pearls.
as many as you like.
How
Yeah.
long did the pearl one take you?
Which one?
It's like around your neck and then coming down your shoulders, draping.
I had the large piece. So the last one that I showed, the full body one, that's a whole. The pearls were actually the easy part of that. That background was going to be the death of me. I changed that background color 4 times. So, and I would paint half the background, which with the pattern. And so, and I just didn't like any of the background colors I was doing. And finally, I finally came into the idea that however it finished. And for some reason, she looked underwater. And at first, I had the hair kind of tight back, and I thought of like more of like Muka. I love Muka. And so I wanted to make the hair flowy and have her look like she was kind of underwater. And I looked at a lot of Muka paintings with like kind of the hair flowing. And so that's where that inspiration came from. The pearls on that one were actually much easier. The one with the hands took a little bit just because those pearls were a little smaller. And so, yeah, once I get to like the last 10 pearls, I'm like, I hate pearls. I hate pearls. And then I do another pearl painting. So, you know, there you go. Because I love
Thank
the
you.
end results. You can't, it's like very satisfying in the end, you know?
Yeah, they're beautiful, beautiful
Oh,
work.
thank you.
I would like to ask, it seems like the commission for Armenta is kind of like one of those dream commissions. Did that feel like an unusual thing, or have you had other ones like that where a company has asked you to paint their product?
Um, you know, it hasn't happened since Armenta since COVID, but yeah, no, I mean it was I think it was because I was doing like all these female empowered pieces and they saw my work and they reached out and it was kind of the perfect collaboration because they're a women owned company. Everybody that works there is a woman and their jewelry had a purpose. Like it was just beautifully made. And so yeah, I mean it did feel like a dream when I got like well also nerve-wracking because I got this massive roll of jewelry. It was probably like I don't know, like $40,000 worth of jewelry that I had in this bag. And I'm like, please don't lose anything because I won't be able to pay them for this. You know, so I'm like making sure everything is accounted for. I took pictures. I was like putting it back in place because I had to take like the little tags off and then put them back on. But yeah, no, it was a lot of like I felt like a kid in a candy store getting to like play dress up for fun. You know what I mean? Because I didn't have to spend any money on it. They just sent it and then I had to send it back. But yeah, it was absolute dream, and I would love to do more collaborations like that. Yeah, absolutely, especially with clothing. I think that I would love to work with somebody who does there's a artist friend of mine. Her name's Kavanaugh Baker, and I'm trying to convince her to send me some of her pieces to use in my work. She was on Project Runway um, uh, forever ago, and we kind of became friends on social media. And then I went to her fashion show in New York, her first fashion show for Fashion Week. And then we just kind of became friends and we hang out when we can. And her dresses are just unbelievable. So I'm hopeful I can convince her to send me. Problem is, her dresses are like, you know, here's a $5,000 dress I'm going to send you. Please send it back in one piece. So, yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions that they would like to pose?
Could I ask a question? Sorry,
Yeah.
hi. feel like I'm
Abs-
like with a celebrity.
Aw.
I have such an art crush.
Aw,
I
thanks.
have, yeah, your work is so amazing.
Thank you.
I'm curious, how do you come up with your compositions? Do you sketch at all, or do you just photograph and then compose that way and then just jump right in? Or do you actually do
Yeah,
sketches and underpainting?
that's a great question. I actually rarely do sketches. I do the sketching for the underpainting when I'm ready to do it, but I compose a lot on Photoshop. I
Okay.
do a lot of composition on Photoshop and I'll play with it. Photoshop's such a great way to play with that composition, see if I like it. Also, Photoshop's great for changing background colors. I love to play with florals and backgrounds, so I'll do like editing and do all sorts of things. Even in the middle of a painting, if I don't like a background, hence that one painting that the background was giving me such trouble, I would go into Photoshop and manipulate the background to see what fit the best. So Photoshop's a great way to kind of quickly, mess around with composition. And I actually work from prints. We have a really good, well, a decent printer, and I don't like to work from a screen, so I print out all of my photo reference to the size that I'm painting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we use a lot of ink because I mean, if I'm
Wow.
working on a 40 by 40, I can only print out a 13 by 19, so I'll work on a section at a time.
Right.
And it depends actually, because like the one with the t-shirt, the graphic t-shirt, I didn't necessarily need, well, with the lettering, I needed the close-ups, but with the whole t-shirt design with the folds and everything, I actually printed it smaller than life size so I can get the idea. I didn't want to be so finite with every wrinkle, even though the wrinkles are important because it describes a teenager, like pulling out a t-shirt out of like, off the floor or whatever. So that was a really important element for me, but I didn't want it to be like overdone. So sometimes like being able to sit back with it is important.
Right. Do you grid?
I don't grid. I actually do like a drawdown, or I'll make tracing paper and then trace down.
Wow.
Yeah.
And can I ask one more question?
Ask as many as you'd like. That's what I'm here for. Please.
So I've recently started doing classical studies and they take forever. So I'm wondering, how do you structure your time being a mom and a wife? And, I mean, like, how do you manage it all? I mean, like, what's your typical work day like?
Well, it's helpful now that my daughter can drive to school because I used to get up at 4:30 every day.
Oh,
Routine is incredibly important. That's the one thing I can say. Once you break your routine, then it's kind of hard to get back into it. So routine's important. So now that my daughter is driving her and my son to school, I can now work out at like, I can get up and work out at like 6:30. So I work out every morning because that's kind of how I get my day started, especially since I sit for my job.
hmm.
And then I'm in the studio all day while they're in
Yeah.
school.
You go
I eat
out to
lunch in
the
the
gym,
studio.
or do you use
No, we
your,
have Pelotons
your
at home. I
Peloton?
don't
Okay.
leave the house. Yeah, we're Peloton obsessed. I'm like an
Okay.
OG Peloton. I've had it since the beginning. So yeah, we have like the weights at home. So yeah, I work out for like an hour and a half at home. And it's like I get so many painting ideas when I work out. It's a big part of my process working out, whether it's
Okay.
meditating, it's yoga at
Yeah.
home, whatever it is. I love that, starting my morning that way. But yeah, then I go immediately into the studio, and I've never not in the studio. Obviously right now I'm not in the studio. I was telling
Yeah.
then this when we before we started, is that those double doors are my studio, and it's being redone a little bit. So I'm getting all the computer work that I always avoid done right now while my studio is being redone, because I'm kind of like I'm going like stir crazy. So I'll probably start sketching and doing some drawings in the meantime. But yeah, I would say like the most important thing as a mom is um, having time for yourself, but your kids in the morning, work out or work during the day when your kids aren't there. And then when they get home from school, I'm still working because they're doing homework, but I make dinner, and then evening time is my downtime, is my
Mhm.
time to spend with my husband. We sit and watch our shows, we watch movies with the kids, whatever. It's kind of an important part. It also gives me a mental break, so I'm not, since I get a good 6 to 8 hours of painting in during the day, having the evening to kind of sit and relax and have a glass of wine is the perfect way to kind of detox like from the painting day. And I always take photos of my work too. I'll obsessively look at like what I've been working on. Um, but yeah, the routine is important for sure. And my kids have grown up with it for so long that they're so used to. I work on the weekends too, so my kids are teenagers now. They don't really want to hang out with me that much. The only time they want to hang out is like my daughter needs to go buy a dress this weekend. She's like, "Mom, what are you doing this weekend?" And I thought she wanted to hang out, like, because she loved me, but she's like, "Can we go buy dresses?" So, now I'm just like relishing the time that they want to spend with me. How old are your kids?
10 and 12. I have two boys.
Okay, yeah.
So they're like already like all they want to do is video games, but
Yeah.
I do have to bring them to the bus stop, and then I when they get home from school they're always hungry.
Yeah. Yeah, so that
it
time in
interrupts
between,
my
make sure
day.
you're just painting. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
Instacart my food. I don't grocery shop. Like I honestly, like, I don't leave the house. I would rather be painting than anything else.
It's great. I love it.
What's your
Yeah.
husband
So
do? You said he's in a studio as well. What's he do?
yeah, he's an artist as well. His name is David Casson, Kassan. He's an incredible painter. So we both paint full time. And we teach workshops together too. So um yeah, he's teaching in we're teaching separately in Scottsdale, but we're teaching in Scottsdale, we're teaching in the Ozarks. This summer we're teaching in Urbino, Italy, if you guys want to come to Italy.
Oh.
I am coming to Scottsdale soon. When are you in Scottsdale?
I'm teaching there the 7th through the 9th. I'm teaching a hand painting workshop.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
When are you going to Italy?
Italy is June 8th through the 14th, and this is a really cool experience. The Italy one is for painters and non-painters. So for people who bring like a partner or a teenage, like a friend or whatever, that are not painters, they have excursions for them. But the price includes the place to stay, all the food. We go tour. We look at we look at where Raphael painted. I mean, it's going to be a history based and also painting the portrait from the photo in the studio.
Is it Spinocchia or where is it at?
In Urbino, I don't know exactly where in Urbino. The company that put it together is renting a massive villa where we're all staying in together.
That's so cool.
It's going to be really a once in a lifetime experience, I think.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah. Do you guys have any other questions?
I do actually, if you don't mind.
Yeah, not at all.
I'm also a huge fan of you and David, and I was really excited to find. So I stalk you on Facebook and all sorts of social media. But I finally was able to get to the principal gallery in Alexandria when they had that beautiful show, and was
Good.
finally able to see your work in person. It's like mind blowing. So it's for anybody who has done the same thing as I have, like go see it in person. It is like 100 times better if you can. You can't even imagine that. So thank you for that. And
Yeah, thank you.
what I was listening you speak about all of these collaborations that you have done, with the seamstress, with the designers, with the jewelry designers, and so forth, and or models coming in, whatever. So could you talk a little bit more about this? Like, what are the highlights of those collaborations? What are like the high points? What is like the biggest benefits to you from a collaborative effort, and then also from the downsides? Because usually when we think about artists, sitting in their studio for 8 hours a day, painting whatever they're doing, but sort of being in solitude, right? And so there's like a little bit of a different animal when you are collaborating and working with somebody together.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The collaborations are actually fairly easy because they're like a one-time kind of situation, and then I can kind of go off. So with Teresa, when I use her dresses, she has a gorgeous space that I can photograph in. So whether I'm using myself or I'm using models for the dresses, I'll just go in. I'll spend a day. I bring in model forms. I will, pay them and have them sign forms. Model release forms are incredibly important to everyone, just so you don't get screwed over for some reason by them wanting part of the sale of your painting. So you have to make it very evident that you are going to be not only selling this painting and you get 100, like we get 100% or whatever the, you make from the painting, that the painting will be shown on social media, that it might be made into print. So there has to be all of that very clear and cut so they know that that's the deal. But you come with that conclusion. So with that business side done, no, with her, I just go in, I'll look at the dresses she has, then I'll come in and photograph and spend the day photographing. And then from that point on, it's just me at home in front of my computer looking at the hundreds and hundreds of pictures I've taken on Photoshop and kind of selecting my favorites and editing them and figuring out like what the purpose is, of like what I'm trying to say. With the lace pieces, it's more of like storytelling and little vignettes. It's a little less, as for those pieces that I was doing. With the jewelry ones, I was obviously featuring the jewelry, so I wanted those to be kind of cropped in to kind of have the story of just the woman moving with the jewelry. And then my current ones with the models that I'm photographing, that again, it's I actually sat down and interviewed them to get to know them before I painted them. So that way, when I painted them, I'm painting them. And that's kind of an important part of the current pieces that I'm working on is knowing who I'm painting and not just painting just to paint it. So that's a fun collaboration for me because I feel like I'm painting a human. I'm painting this person and hopefully capturing the essence of who they are.
Well, it looks like you definitely are. I wanted to echo what you said about the so I'm a lawyer by day, and I volunteer for the Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts. So we do a lot of pro bono work for the for artists, for visual, music, whatever else. And so that is one of the biggest issues. And I'm usually on the side where I can see how badly things could go. So whatever you have models or agreements or purchase, any kind of like sales or whatever else, like making sure that it's very well documented is the best thing that you can do.
No, absolutely. I mean, David just had a situation where he had a model that he already paid and they had a contract, and he used her during COVID because she's good at photographing herself.
Mhm.
And he used her for workshops and for other stuff. And she just reached out to him like recently saying that she wants money from half of his painting sales, which obviously isn't legal to do.
Right.
But when people are struggling, they'll do anything to try to get money. You know what I'm saying? And so she obviously wasn't going to get anything, but it was kind of sad because he's like never going to use her again, and he enjoyed having her as the model. And so it's definitely important to have that document for safety as artists, because we ourselves aren't always thriving. We live month to month
Right.
depending, and so it's important to have our own backs. So yeah. Any other questions?
So on on that topic, do you have an attorney review that, or do you just go with kind of the best practices that you've seen online?
Yeah, I write up a form and they sign it and I sign it, and my neighbor is a lawyer. Thankfully, I've had her she read it over. She says, I mean, it's a
That's pretty
legal
good.
binding, so
Yeah.
it doesn't, I had all of the information, if it was commercial, whatever it is, if it went into a magazine, all that kind of stuff, that I have the rights to whatever I create.
Okay, because I've used models too in my work, but a little bit differently. It's actually the photograph. So I've got a release from the photographer and the model. But
Oh,
in the release, it was more vague. Like it was more like could use your photo for anything, and then it could use your photographs for anything. Kind of more. This will be used for artistic purposes, yada yada.
yeah.
But I didn't
Yeah.
like specify. Like you were like, this could be a print, this could be this, it could be that. But maybe it's because you are doing more commercial related stuff. Mine is kind of just one-offs, unique.
Yeah, because sometimes I'll make a print of it, or sometimes
Yeah.
it'll be asked to be published in a magazine. And so, whatever the case may be, I just want to make sure that it's clearly stated.
So most states do have volunteer lawyers for the arts. This is just for, and this is a pro bono services, so they're free of charge.
Oh,
You would
that's
apply for it,
amazing.
and yeah, they would assign a lawyer to you based on, your question, your particular question. Like a theater group might use somebody else, an individual artist would, but there are services available if you look them up, or if you
Oh,
contact your local bar association, wherever you're located.
Yeah, that's good to know.
If you're in Pennsylvania, I'm happy to help you. But if you're outside of that, that's a different story. But look them up. I mean, it is very important, and it could avoid all sorts of trouble and all sorts of
So,
expense.
yeah, just get it out of the way at the beginning so you could just
Yeah.
focus on painting. Any other questions? And if you guys think of questions after the fact, I am available on Instagram. It's not like you can't reach out. So please feel free to reach out if ever you have any more questions.
I want to ask you about your journey. As you started out, kind of taught yourself. You talked about your schooling, but you didn't really talk about a whole lot on the ramping up of your art career itself. Did you start out in small galleries? Were you selling it at art fairs?
That's a great question. I totally jumped over that whole thing. Yeah, when I started, especially, before I got divorced, I started applying for small group exhibitions, little juried shows. And oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. My daughter's home. That's why my dogs are barking at. It's just my daughter coming home. Hi. So, yeah, I totally skipped over that whole part. Thank you for asking. Yeah, so I started, like I said before, applying for small group exhibitions and little juried shows, and I was winning awards for small shows, so it was kind of encouraging. And I remember my first painting sale in 2000, like right before I got divorced. I sold this massive painting that I did in my master's during my master's program of me wearing fairy wings and a tutu to this couple in Colorado at a show that I was in. And I thought, wow, I can actually like create pieces with my own stories and sell them. And so when I got divorced, I knew I needed to figure out how to supplement my income because I was no longer being taken care of because I was, in a relationship before where my husband was taking care of me. So I started teaching little kids art classes for after school classes and doing summer camps in my studio. And I had an external studio that I was renting because I was at that time living in a condo, and started making just enough money to be able to pay the bills. And then from teaching little kids classes, I built up the courage to teach teenagers. And then, which is scarier than adults, honestly, but I still built the courage to teach teenagers, started getting regular students, weekly students coming in and started teaching serious like kids that wanted to learn. Slowly stopped teaching little kids, stopped doing camps, just taught teenagers, and then started getting adults in my studio, started teaching adults, started teaching at the local art school here, the Albuquerque New Mexico Art League. I started teaching workshops there and classes there and just making money a little bit here and there. And then art, like I wasn't really showing in any galleries. David and I went to Santa Fe and I started passing out business cards to some of the galleries, heard back from the gallery. They picked me up that next day, took 2 of my paintings, sold them immediately. And so I started just getting inspired by this and just, giving them work, and they had some great collectors. Eventually I left the gallery there because I started selling a lot on my own on social media, which was providing me making all of the money. And I also started showing in galleries in New York that were doing 60-40, 70-30, where I'd get a larger cut. And so my gallery in Santa Fe was not budging on 50-50, and they're not large on social media, and they weren't bringing collectors anymore, and I was bringing them all collectors. So I felt like I was just giving them 50% of my money. And so I eventually left the gallery because I feel like as artists, we should be advocates for ourselves. And just because a gallery wants to show your work doesn't mean they deserve to show your work. And so I feel like galleries need to do just as much work for you as you do for them. And as you do on the work, you're creating the work. So yeah, it was a little bit of a slow build, but eventually I started, getting into magazines and just putting my work out there. The only way to get your work seen and to sell your work or is to put it out there and to let people know that your work is available. Because you'd be surprised at how many people just don't share their work because they're afraid to, but then no one's going to see it. So I think social media, mostly for me, Instagram. I don't really do TikTok or any of the younger kids things, like pretty much stay true to what I do. I don't do fancy videos. I'm not going to sit there and like spend 3 hours editing a video just to post on social media. My focus is just to create work, maybe do a reel on like slideshow of my paintings, but I'm just here to paint and create something that hopefully somebody connects with. And I don't need, I just don't feel like the fancy stuff pushes it any further for me. But yeah, it took a little bit of time. It was a lot of teaching little kids. I have to tell you though, once I stopped teaching the teenagers, that was a blessing because there was a point when I was like, I cannot teach teenagers anymore. Even though their parents were paying good money for it, they were listening half the time. But it's a joy to teach adults. Like that's become my new, workshops are the consistent guaranteed income, which is great because I get to travel because of it and I meet so many interesting people and I learn something from somebody every time. It's just like, it's such a great experience. I couldn't express more how much I love teaching. I also mentor online. So that's a nice little income. So I do mentoring online as well.
What was your favorite publication or like the most one that you felt like was the biggest honor?
When I was on the cover of Artist Magazine.
That's awesome.
That was shocking. Yeah, that one was pretty awesome. And then recently, that was probably the top. Oh, I don't know. I was also asked to paint a celebrity for Time Magazine. So I did a painting and I was in Time Magazine.
Oh, wow.
That was pretty cool. Yeah, my husband couldn't have been more jealous. He says on his bucket list, he has two things: to be in Time Magazine with a painting and to do a stamp. He wants to design a stamp. So I got the Time Magazine before he did, which is shocking because he's amazing. Someday he will.
So you're pretty consistent. Like, do you get burnout with your workload?
No, not really. I've only been burnt out twice. Once when I had a show in the Hamptons and I do these large Mylar word balloon paintings with floral backgrounds.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
And yeah, and they're so fun, but I was like trying to finish these pieces and I was working 12-hour days and I wasn't able to hang out with my kids at night because I was just overloaded. And there was a point I was like, I'm getting burnt out. I'm like, I can't wait to send this work and I can't wait to go to the Hamptons. So that I remember getting a little burnt out just specifically with like the amount of time I was working. Because I'm really good at balancing. I think like 6 to 9 hour days is a good amount of time to work. 12 hours is becoming a little bit much. And so I was getting a little bit exhausted. And then the painting that was at the principal gallery, I got a little burnt out with that background. I'm not going to lie. I was like, that background, I'm so glad it came together because like, I haven't struggled with a painting like my husband was like, what is going on with you? And I'm like, I don't know what's going on with this background. It's going to be the death of me. So other than that, no, I've never had painter's block. Luckily, I always have something to work on. I always have an idea. I always have a panel primed, ready to go. So there's never downtime of like, oh, I have to wait for my panel to dry because I work on aluminum composite panels, and I prime them with gray gesso, which dries fairly quickly, but still, like I don't have any. I always have something readily available for me to work on. I'd go stir crazy if I did. I always think I'm like, what do people do on weekends if they don't paint? You know what I mean? I'm like, what do non-artists do on weekends? because I'm always
like,
painting.
did it take a while for you to get consistent with your sales? And I mean, after teaching, or was it like kind of, did it happen kind of all at once? Because I
Yeah,
just
sales are
find it's
never
like real up
consistent
and
for
down.
sure. Yeah,
Okay.
sales are never consistent.
All
Teaching
right.
is always consistent. The one
Yeah.
thing I would advocate is always announce that your work is available on social media. And if anybody ever reaches out to you on social media on like first of all, make sure it's not a scam because there's so many scammers. We should David, I don't know if you follow my husband David Casson, he has a YouTube channel he's just started. And he wants me to help him out. I'm not a YouTube person. He keeps telling me to start a YouTube. It's just not going to happen. But I am going to help him with this specific YouTube. We're going to talk about scams, like how to see a scam, because
Yeah.
lately we've had a lot of scams lately. But if somebody's legit, and if someone's interested in your work, or if you've had a previous collector buy a painting before, always flag them. There's like this little thing that you can do on Instagram Messenger where you can flag who they are or write down their name or something. Keep tabs of it, because every time I finish a new piece, I always reach out to either past collectors, I mean, or somebody who's been interested in something before. And I would say 50% of the time, which is a good percentage, it sells. So never be afraid to reach out. The worst thing someone can say is no, which is not that bad, because at least you said something. Or actually, the worst thing they can do is just ignore you. That's worse. But most of the time, they'll say not right now, or maybe like this, blah, blah, blah. I also offer payment plans, so people can pay in installments, because I want my work to be accessible, because so my work can be expensive. So I want it to be accessible for people as well. I have somebody paying for like a $10,000 painting. He's paying $500 a month, which honestly is like the lowest I'll take, because it's going to take him forever to pay it off. But when he's done, he'll have this painting of, for him, a $10,000 painting, which, everyone works
no,
hard
that's
for
great.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. I love
And
that.
I'm not going to poo-poo getting $500 a month. You know what I mean?
Right. Do you send out a mailing list pretty regularly?
No, I'm terrible with that. I'm just like not. I know artists that have mailing lists, they do all this stuff. My only mailing list I do is every once in a while for people I've taught before, my past workshop students. I'll send a mass list of like, hey, here are my upcoming workshops. But other than that, yeah, I don't really do a mailing
So it's
list.
mostly through social media that you're doing all your marketing and sales.
Yeah,
That's great.
mostly.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. So you're not in a gallery right now?
I show in New York. I have two
Okay.
galleries I show in New York,
Okay.
and I have some paintings in a Bend gallery in Colorado,
Yeah.
and I have a painting somewhere in California too that I was going to show with Beautiful Bazaar. They still have the painting. Like, I just keep track. If you guys ever are curious of like a good website to keep track of where your art is, Artwork Archive. I don't know if you've heard of
Yeah.
it.
I use it. I love it.
Yeah,
They're awesome.
it's great. It's so good, especially if you get somebody asking about available work. You can send them a list from there.
Yeah. No, this is great. It's really helpful. I mean,
Yeah, of course.
I
I
just
do
find
want to
sales.
show in a gallery again, or in Santa Fe at least. So David and I want to go do like a gallery hunt one day, because not the gallery I used to show in, obviously, but something a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah. I lived in Santa Fe for like 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Contemporary, I don't know if Contemporary Southwest is still out there. And
Oh, it sounds
Turner
familiar.
Carroll was a really neat
Turner Carroll
gallery.
is, I think so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Canyon Road is it's fun.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's where I was showing, and that's the only thing I miss is that people would go and be like, "Oh, I saw your painting," which I love,
Yeah.
like, because so many people go to Santa Fe. So we have a friend who owns a gallery in Santa Fe on Canyon Road, but they're all Western, so I can't show, I'm not going to show there, but they have casitas in the back. So I'm like, hey, we're going to stay at one of your casitas so we can go gallery hunt.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You won't have any problem. Well, thank you so much. This has been really great.
Yeah, of course. Are there any other questions?
All right.
No? All right. It's Friday. Everyone should open up a bottle of wine now.
Yes. Shana, thank you so much for spending your Friday evening with us.
Of
And
course. I'm sorry that
and
my dogs try to get into the conversation a little bit.
I feel like this has just been a really nice gathering of friends, really.
Oh,
So
good.
that's really nice. I wanted to mention we are recording, and so we'll make the recording available if you want to revisit it. And I also wanted to mention we've got a couple of programs coming up with the exhibition as the backdrop. We have Rodeo Drive, which is our fundraiser that we have every few years, and it's a massive sale of secondhand luxury clothing and accessories. And so that's coming up on February 6th. Will be the fashion show on February 7th. And then we're tickled pink to say that on March 15th will be the host of the Wichita's Mayor's Youth Council fashion show, which is titled Spring Renaissance, and that will be all thrifted clothing that the teenagers will be wearing for that show. So we've got some exciting things coming up in conjunction with the exhibition, and we're so grateful to you, Shana, for selecting such wonderful work for the
Oh, it
exhibition.
looked amazing. Of course, it was such good work.
Yes. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and keep in touch.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.